Hello. How you doing? It is me. Live, yeah. Leon. I'm sorry. To fuck with your eyes. I don't know. I thought it looked cool. I guess it doesn't. I can fix it. There you go. Two of these were the same. Huh. I'm sorry that I made your eyes vibrate. Yeah, what's going on with y'all? I am I'm late for all the usual reasons. I can only apologize. The vibrator. Very good, very good. I don't really have too much to talk about. I'll be honest. I have been just whiling out on my work project. And it's not very interesting or fun to talk about. It's just really damn difficult and very compressed timeline. And I'm not even working on things that that are like good. No, I don't get paid overtime. So I've fallen into the classic crap. Just, yeah, working on evil things. I can at least say that I think for the most part, the stuff I work on is benign. Because I work on stores, the worst that it gets is like I am helping some Nepo baby entrepreneur hawk their fucking wellness supplement thing. You know? Which, you know, that does suck. I feel like you should know whether or not you're doing that, Fox. Yeah, unfortunately they would notice that pretty quick, Sith. They would notice that pretty quick. I can at least say that I do enjoy what I do. I'm pretty fucking amazing when it comes to custom UI with JavaScript and CSS. But I'd better be, because it's been, you know, years and years and years and years. Is this a real thing you're referencing, Ifa? Oh, wow. Yeah. I feel like there's a documentary about that one, RP. Feel like there's a little short little documentary about that. Yeah. I could run some stupid bullshit by you guys. I thought I had a good idea for a sort of... Is it a joke? I'm not sure. But I'm curious whether or not it makes any fucking sense to anybody, because I showed it to Nakomi and Nakomi was like, you don't give people enough for them to follow what the fuck it is that you're trying to fucking say. So this is literally just super stupid. This is a dumb exercise, but I'm curious what you guys think. Also, it's gonna be like absolutely not the same as if you encountered it in text. So this really won't tell me anything. It's gonna probably be advantaged from you hearing me say it with my mouth as opposed to reading it in text form. What I wrote, which I deleted, was this machine kills Americans, colon, and then space, and then A, do not choose option B. B, instant death. I have a feeling Nakomi was right. It made perfect sense to me, but I guess I'm just not good at conveying what's in my head to other people. Yeah, I guess I was too broad, or it's also that I have a perspective of like, I don't even think of myself as an American anymore. So I guess when I say Americans, it means something different to me than like almost everybody else. Americans to me are I have ceded the concept of an American over to the ultra patriots. I would rather not be called an American at this point. So that's part of the problem with what I wrote. It was more, so here's what I was driving at, and this is why I will always fail, and I'll never be a writer. And no one will ever like anything that I say online. But what I was trying to say was, dumb fuck Americans will be killed by that quiz every single time because they would always choose B because they will not do what they're told. They won't let anybody tell them that they can't choose for themselves. Basically. If A is don't choose option B, even if it's for your own good, and B is instantaneous death, shithead Americans will always choose B and die. And I guess it was just too in my head, I guess, right? Is that what's wrong with the way I wrote it? You tell me. Like, I know that when Nakomi gives me a review, it's correct. So I'm just trying to, I'm gathering information now. That shit sat in my head all day while I was working. Yeah, that's definitely a problem. Yeah, I agree, Matanks. I think that's the part where it was the most, this requires you to be inside my head to understand what the fuck I meant. Because basically, you have to share the starting position with me of having an extremely dismal view of Americans that's brought up by merely the term Americans without any other descriptor, without specifying subgroups or anything. So that's instantly a failure. There's a few of you here who are on that level with me, but nevertheless. I was trying to I was grabbing at that concept of the thing that happened during the pandemic, for instance, where we literally witnessed this happen, right? There are people who literally in this country died because they didn't want to be told what to do. It was more important to them, it was basically live free or die, give me freedom or give me death, but in the dumbest way, not in a cool, revolutionary way, but in a dumbass sense of if you take this pill, it will heal your disease and you will live. Well, I refuse to do that because you're telling me to take a pill. Therefore, I will die. That's the level of, and that's how I view Americans. I feel like Americans are majority that at this point. That's probably not. That's where it's me being way too fucking. I'm just too far down the rabbit hole. I think actually the majority is more apathy or blithe obliviousness is really more the majority in this country. And the people who are the MAGA people who I'm really talking about here are not a majority here. They just, in a weird roundabout way, accidentally have ultimate power right now. It's called Sith. It's called fuck. What is there's a term for it. It's actually, I think, usually applied to toddlers. It's called oppositional. It's not It's not contrarianism. Is it oppositional defiance? Yeah, it is essentially, it's kind of like contrarianism, but yeah, they will just basically, they put themselves mindlessly in the opposite position, which is what makes these people so infuriating. They don't have a good reason for any of their behavior. It's all opposite world, and you can't talk to them, you can't argue with them, you can't convince them, you can't change them, you can't collaborate with them or reach across the aisle to them. None of these things, nothing. None of that is possible. It's because what they do is not based off of a shared reality with the rest of us. No, it absolutely has, Sith. Not some. All, really. There was an article I saw today of, some woman was interviewed about like how she didn't go to the right for the ideology. She went for the contrarian frisson. Unfortunately, I didn't actually read the article. I saw some like highlights or lowlights really that people were sharing around, and that was one of the things. It was like literally she was drawn to it for the oppositional defiance. Yes, I have. I've seen that podcast. I saw when they were on Hassan's podcast or Hassan's stream. Frisson is gosh, that's hard to describe. It's a good feeling. It's kind of like goosebumps. When you get goosebumps from like when you get touched in a positive way and it triggers goosebumps, and that feeling I think that's described as frisson. Suffice to say, a pleasant feeling. Apparently, Arfie. It's frisson. Frisson. Do I have to say the end big like that? Frisson. Is this better? Yeah, but it's not what I says. I don't know why frisson is just how I've always said it, and I don't know why now. It doesn't have anything that necessitates the sh that I've been giving it. Nevertheless. If you mix those three, you get frisson. So, I mean, it's perfect. Yeah, I'm always wary of, I'm a little wary of those, Cercero, particularly when it comes to Reddit, because what happens is that they, those have a tendency to, go down the bad path. for instance, there's this one I keep seeing popping up is called Doomer Circle Jerk, and it's basically a subreddit that pretends it's not fully fucking right-wing, but it absolutely is right-wing. But they kind of LARP as though they are extreme centrists. But it's what's weird about it and kind of funny. First of all, they're all delusional. So let's get that out of the way. But there's layers to the delusion that are interesting. Because they called their subreddit a circle jerk, and they will say the term unjerk, but they don't do any of what's, you know, called the jerk. They don't do any jerking. In the sense of like what people understand a circle jerk community to mean. Which is usually, it's like a satirical thing where you pretend to be one thing, but you're doing so to make fun of the actual thing. But they don't do that. They're not pretending to be anybody. They are just in a subreddit and they're all mad together. And they're also all conservative headed. Probably the spectrum would be like hard right to full on fascist. The most LARPy part about it is how they definitely take this position of like nothing is happening. That everything everyone says is an exaggeration. And of course, as is classic with, you know, it's the same as like the conservative subreddit. When actually things happen that weren't exaggerations, no one's issuing a correction. In fact, you won't see anything about that thing. They just don't talk about that thing anymore. Because the only way to maintain the reality is that you never acknowledge that the things you say aren't happening have happened. Because then everything starts to unravel. You've pulled the thread. You're you know, the emperor's naked, etc. Oh, fun times. I mean, this is also what's frustrating about talking about all this stuff. Because really, Rudy, it's hard to land on any explanation at all for anything. Like what you've said is totally plausible. But then, counterexample to that, we've seen plenty of cases where it has happened to them, and still they persist. So what does that mean? How do you explain that? So it's not just like that they haven't developed the empathy of having direct experience, because then they have the direct experience and they still don't, you know? It's hard to put a pin in any of it. I think that there's just a massive mix of grifters and con men and delusion and confusion that you can't really easily explain, because some of the people who you would think are just clearly obviously con men are so apparently good at putting up a deluded facade that you really can't tell if they're accidentally con men or if they're just that good. Don't know. Like, is RFK putting us all on? Or is it all real? But I don't like to take away his agency because he went to Samoa and killed a shit ton of children. And he still gets to walk free. So, you know. I think the one thing that you can say really hard and straight down the line that applies to everything is that this is what a no consequences world looks like. Not that we had a fully consequences world to begin with. It's not like corruption just started. But we were not completely no consequences in the way that we have become of late. Like, people used to go to jail for financial crimes. You know? Believe me, it happened. It's true. Let alone all the other fucking insane, far worse shit that's gone on. And I think the only thing that'll fix me is seeing some consequences of levels unheard of. Levels unseen in modern times. Because there is a really long line of people that need to be walking the plank. And I don't think I'm ever going to feel normal until and unless that occurs. And honestly, I have little to no hope that it will, but you know, for instance, Elon has many good years left, and I think they should be bad. I think most of those remaining years should be spent staring at a wall. Hey, you know, everybody has their list, Dave. What needs must. If you haven't seen the videos of the depositions of the Doge Boys, I recommend against watching those videos. And I imagine that the people who have seen them would agree with me. You don't need to see those. You really, I mean, it's just not, it's not good for your sanity. What's the gist? Well, so with one of them, I don't know who's who, by the way, of this band of dickheads. Yeah, Dave's already there, way ahead of me. I think it's the older one who was sort of the leader of the children. And they kept asking him to explain, like, what did he consider DEI to be? And he kept deflecting. Basically the same thing that every single one of these motherfuckers do. The same shit that Pam Bondi does and Nancy Mace and all these motherfuckers, where they do that thing where they kind of, they say a weird empty phrase to avoid answering. It's almost like a rephrasing of the question they were asked, because they think that they're above everything. They think that they're in charge of everything. And so it's all a game to them. Anyway, he was doing that. He kept saying, well, what I consider DEI to be is what it said in the executive order. And then they would ask him again, and he would, like, what does it mean to you? What was your definition when you were making decisions? And he kept saying that. And then I think that guy in particular, he didn't land on any answer. I don't think it came to an answer. I was so livid by the time I got to the end of that. I don't know that I was even absorbing information anymore. And then also, Dave, maybe you can explain this to me. In all of these videos, why is there a person that occasionally goes objection, but it doesn't seem to mean anything or matter? And in fact, oftentimes when I've heard them say objection, the answer that follows them saying objection will be more of an answer than it was, which I assumed that the person saying objection is the person representing the idiot that we're looking at. Yeah, sure. You want to go in Boyos? I'm in there. Ah. Goddamn Discord. Oh, wow. It's okay, Dave. I don't want you to go to all this trouble. The other kid made me even more livid. Because, boy, that kid, man, he was raised to be evil. Another deleted post of mine because it was making a reference that no one on Earth was getting except for me. But basically, I said that he's like the good son, but if Susan made the wrong choice. And for those of you, for all of you who haven't seen The Good Son, basically, it's a movie about a psychopath, murderous child. Basically, this family has 3 kids. The good son murders one of the kids, but nothing happens to him, and they don't really believe that he murdered him. But then the course of the story is that there's another son, and blah blah blah. The spoiler, the ending is that the mom is forced into a situation to choose whether her actual good son or the evil son fall off the edge of a cliff, and she has to pick one, and she picks the actual non-murderous son. And isn't it funny now that I've explained it? Hey, Dave.
Yo.
How you doing?
So, I explain this to clients all the time. The traditional objections we see in legal dramas, which is how 90% of people are going to be familiar with the deposition, are called speaking objections. This is a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, so I cannot speak beyond New York, but I imagine that the jurisdiction in which these depositions are being held, likely DC, has the same new rules regarding them. For years, you were allowed to make speaking objections at depositions, which is where the attorney makes an objection, they argue about it, and then the attorney instructs their client not to answer.
Right.
90% of the time, what followed after that was you have to call a judge and get a ruling on the spot on that objection, where the judge decides, does the shithead being questioned have to answer it or not?
Holy shit.
As you can imagine, judges don't like that.
Yeah.
The way it works now is that you make the objection and you don't argue it on the record. So, for example, if I don't think that the question that he's asking you is relevant to the litigation, if I don't, whatever normal reason you'd make an objection, 90% of the reasons you'd make them, you'd say, objection, you can answer if you understood the question. And that person is then, the person being questioned is allowed to answer. And if you really think it's a problem, you make a motion for a protective order that essentially strikes that portion of the transcript so it cannot get introduced at trial.
Gotcha.
That way, judges don't have to be put on the spot in making these decisions. And instead, 90% of them get filtered out because they don't really matter. Uh, because like I may object to something and like in the long run the answer doesn't hurt us and like fuck it, whatever, I'm not going to object to that because it's not going to get read to the jury at trial because it doesn't matter and it probably helps us. And so we've removed the step of annoying a judge with a question on the spot that ends up never being an issue, you know?
Yeah. No,
The
yeah, this
ex-
all sounds like a huge improvement.
the exceptions to those are things that are protected, like attorney-client privilege. So, for example, one of the things that I do when I'm questioning a plaintiff in a case, because I'm a defense attorney, is I will ask them, have you discussed the case with anyone in preparation for your deposition today? Now, the obvious answer to that for every single person is, yes, I discussed it with my attorney. So
Uh-huh.
instead of just asking that question, I preface it by saying, I want to preface this by saying that the conversations between yourself and your attorney are privileged. I'm not entitled to know the contents of those conversations, and I'm not asking you to disclose them. That
Uh-huh.
said, have you discussed your case today or the deposition? I'll ask the question in multiple different ways. Have you discussed this deposition with anyone in preparation for today? And then what I'll typically get is, yes, my attorney, and that's the end of the answer. Occasionally I get, yeah, I talked about it with my attorney, and I also talked about it with my husband, or I talked about it with my friend. And at that point, I will go on to question, well, what did you talk about with your friend?
Mm.
In what context was the deposition brought up? Is your friend generally familiar with the litigation itself? All those sorts of um, in a situation where an attorney were to just ask, um, have you discussed this litigation with anyone in preparation for today's deposition? And let's say, for example, it's my client, I'm defending the deposition.
Mhm.
Um, I will object to the question. Typically, a smart attorney will be quick enough to realize, you know, oh, they're objecting because I'm asking. I won't object to that question, but I'll say, you know, or I'll say something like, objection to the extent that the question is asking about privileged communication between my client and our office.
Right.
Um, and they'll rephrase at that point because everyone knows exactly like why I objected to that. The other objection you might get where there's some pushback is objection as to form. So, for example, if you're my client and we're at a deposition and you're being accused of you did a kickflip with your car
Yes.
and it was negligent and you hit and killed somebody, and they
Right.
start asking, Loco, when you decided to do the kickflip with the car, were you thinking it was cool, or did you think it would be interesting, or did you think that maybe it would score you some points with your friends? I will object as to form because he's asking you a compound question.
Right.
And typically, objection as to form will go one of two ways. I will start the objection as to form, and plaintiff's counsel will realize what they've said is kind of like, I mean, man, just ask it in 3 fucking separate questions. And they'll go, withdrawn, let me rephrase that. And they'll rephrase it and it'll be perfectly fine. Or I'll say, objection as to form. If you understood the question, you can answer. And that second part I say to my client.
Right.
And the client is almost always prepped going into a deposition. There may be scenarios where like it's really last minute, but like you should not take a client or a witness into a deposition without prepping them. They're a party witness. And
Mhm.
part of what they'll be prepped on is 3 things. I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. I don't remember is a perfectly acceptable answer. And if you don't understand the question, ask them to rephrase it. You have the right to ask them to rephrase it as many times as you need to make sure you fully understand that question. So if there is any doubt in your mind as to what that question is asking, ask them to rephrase it. Because if you provide an answer, they are going to assume you understood the question, and that transcript is going to appear as though you understood the question.
Gotcha.
So typically a client will catch a witness should catch on at that point that, like, I have objected to form and said you can answer if you understood the question. That means, hey, maybe I should think really hard about what was just asked because my attorney thinks that it's not a clear question. And if my attorney thinks it isn't clear, it's probably not clear, you know?
So it's really...
So those are the only...
Sorry. So it's really like it's procedural, and it's basically it's just attorney doing their fucking job.
Yes. I like you will the uptick to this is that it has resulted in more objections and not less. But they don't interrupt the flow of a deposition because it's, as you saw, someone says deposition and everything, or opposition, or objection rather, and everything keeps on trucking.
Yeah.
Occasionally, if it's really bad, everyone will still go off the record. The attorneys will have a conversation about it. If they can reach a resolution, they'll pop back on the record, and the questioning attorney will withdraw the prior question, ask a new question, and an answer will get provided. Or the objecting attorney will make some clarification on the record on behalf of their client, and then you move on. So it's really just like... This is why I get so pissed off at people reading deposition transcripts who have no legal training, because this is one of the things where it's like, you are reading into things that aren't things, and you don't know what the fuck you're talking about when they start reading into objections. Because, like, I'll be honest with you, half the objections now are not maybe even fully thought out, because you don't have to justify them on the record. And if it becomes an off-the-record argument, and you hit a point where you're like, I can't justify this, you just go back on the record and let him keep going, because, like, you didn't have to interrupt a judge for it, so whatever.
Yeah, might as well fire it off.
Yeah, whereas like, if I had to worry that I'd have to interrupt a judge because plaintiff wants to push back on every objection, I might not object as often, because...
There's consequences.
Not that there's consequences, but, like, the justification isn't necessarily fully formed in that moment. Right. So you may object to something because it feels off, and you're not exactly sure why it feels off in that moment. And given the benefit of time, you could go and do the research on the law and figure out, oh, it feels off because X, Y, and Z. But right there in the moment, you don't necessarily have the fully fleshed out thought on that, and you don't have time to circle back to it and object.
Yeah. A funny side effect of this, by the way, I wanted to say is, I don't know if it's like a particular tone that you put on or anything along those lines, but a couple of the times when you were giving me the examples, I felt like I was in the chair.
I mean, like, I do this for a living. It's like... One of the ways a law professor I had described it was that, like, it's jousting. It's formal combat between knights. Yeah. Like, you as an attorney are championing someone's cause. You need to be professional in that way that says, I know what I'm doing and I belong here.
Right.
You know, even in situations where maybe you don't fucking know what you're doing per se.
Gotcha.
And it also helps for, like, as an attorney, you're going to end up representing clients that you don't necessarily agree with, or clients that you know did something wrong. They are still entitled to a defense. It's why I get particularly annoyed at people that are like, well, we all know this person did something terrible. Why are you defending them? Because
that's
the
stupid.
benefit of our system is that everyone gets a defense. And like,
this is the same
reason for that.
This is the same breakdown in logic with the, like, it's good to just deport the criminals. Well, no.
Due process exists for a reason.
Yeah, due process.
And
exactly.
like, the reason for it is supposed to be that it is a heinous violation of someone's rights to penalize them, whether that be civilly in the form of money or criminally in the form of jail time, if you cannot prove the things that are alleged.
Yeah.
And that is why the burden is on the plaintiff or the prosecution to prove the claims. And like, does that result in like sometimes you give a defense to people that you find less than savory, but like they didn't, the outcome may have been bad, but they didn't break the law. They weren't negligent. They didn't commit the crime because the elements aren't satisfied. Like, yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah. That's the thing that I think people are struggling with now. We're kind of losing that extra layer of thought, I guess. I don't know. Just people. Maybe it's like a sort of a general loss of faith, I guess, or something in the systems. But like,
no, that sentiment has always been there about the law.
right.
That is kind of always. For example, I am an insurance defense attorney. My job is, you have an insurance policy. Someone sues you for something that is covered under that policy. Most often, in my case, it's either construction accidents or like premises liability, trip and fall, slip and fall, that type of thing.
Yep.
Your insurance company hires me to step in and defend that case. And my job is to provide an accurate assessment to the insurance company. Can we defend this? Can we not defend this? What is the value of this case based on other decisions in, the jurisdiction as to what juries have awarded and what settlement values are, and like what courts have upheld on both of those fronts, to assess like what is the proper way to try and resolve this matter. And oftentimes, like, are you dealing with someone who was actually hurt? Yes. Were they actually hurt because of the negligence of whoever it is I'm defending? Oftentimes not. Most often, it's gray.
Yeah.
Most often, it's not a clear-cut scenario. And the truth of those gray scenarios is that, like, yeah, you can't prove the elements there, so you probably shouldn't win, and that sucks for the person who was hurt. But there's a reason you have to prove the elements.
Yeah.
It
can't be just because you feel like it's got to be this way or that way.
Yeah, and like that also leans into like, I'm in the greater New York area. I practice in basically every city court except for Staten Island. I practice on both courts on Long Island, and I practice, I've had cases in several upstate courts, and you start to get to know demographics in areas and like how juries are likely to feel, and that has a significant impact on the case because they end up not necessarily like strictly following the law, in that like at the end of the day, if you get a jury with 12 people that agree your client is guilty, like they can render a guilty verdict, and like, can you appeal that and possibly get it overturned? Yes, but like it happens. And so like Brooklyn and the Bronx are known to be pro-plaintiff venues. You are very unlikely to get a strict defense verdict there. And when you get a plaintiff's verdict, you are likely to get a value on that verdict that is so high that you have to appeal it, because the appeals court will look at it and say, no, the sustainable value is half of it.
Right.
Manhattan, you're a little less likely. It's a little more evenly split, the biases there. Queens, flip-flops, I would say.
Right.
Nassau County, Suffolk County on Long Island, defense verdict focus. And that also tends to come particularly from an understanding of insurance, where in a lot of the more plaintiff-friendly venues, the people looking at that and if they understand that insurance is going to be footing the bill on the verdict, think, well, it's play money. It's from the insurance company. Who cares?
Right.
Which isn't actually true. The policy on that only goes up to a certain amount, and most often that policy limit is $1 million. So if you award $3 million to someone, they're gonna get the $1 million from the policy, and then they've got to try and enforce anything beyond that, which means pursuing the assets of whatever company
Right.
that was, and you're like not likely to get the full amount on that. Whereas Long Island and Nassau and Suffolk County on Long Island, you have a lot more. You tend to have a lot more business owners on juries who have insurance of their own and understand how that works, and they look at it as, well, this is the kind of thing that makes my premium go up.
Right.
which restrains them in the amount that they award as a verdict. And then beyond that, it is a problem in New York, but as I understand it, it's also happening in DC and a couple other states. There's a ring of alleged RICO going on right now, where sometimes in trip and falls, but more often than not in construction accidents, individuals who are immigrants to this country are being convinced to, in some cases, stage accidents, in some cases lie about accidents that they were involved in, then being sent off to doctors who are essentially in cahoots with these companies or these referral sources for the individuals who are often working with or alleged to be working with organized crime, who then do false write-ups of the individual and recommend treatment that they don't actually need, claim that they perform surgeries they didn't actually perform, all to increase the value of cases, with kickbacks everywhere along the way.
Right.
So like that further undermines the like efforts to actually get to a just resolution here, because you've got all of these fake cases. And I can tell you from experience that what that has done is made everyone suspect of every case that walks through the door.
Right.
So insurance companies are less likely to want to go the settlement route immediately, because they want to thoroughly investigate all of these to find out if the injuries are actually legitimate, if they're connected to any of these fraud rings or anything like that. It makes the job easier, or not easier, more difficult for everyone along the way.
Right.
Because like in a lot of these cases, you're getting asked by the insurance companies to like, what can, is there any indication that this is fraud? And if there isn't, and you say no, they're like, well, what about X, Y, and Z? We need to look into this. And the things they want you to look into are things that like you can't prove. There's no way to find that information out.
Right. Right. Yeah. But they have it in their heads because of what's going on, or what's allegedly going on.
It's not a. I will stick to allegedly for the purposes of I am saying this publicly. There's fraud happening.
Right.
The extent to which it is may be debatable, but it is significant and it is happening. And doctors are losing their right to treat patients on workers' compensation because of it, for example.
Right.
We're finding operative reports that are literally copy and pasted and are the same things that was written on another person's operative report. Plaintiffs will simply go missing when it comes time for them to appear for deposition. Right. It is happening. Now, finding out if it's happening is, in fact, being made more difficult by DHS.
Right.
Because their decision to raid courthouses means a lot of these individuals who were roped into this as a way of thinking it would make them money more quickly are not appearing for court dates because it does not feel safe to go. And in all fairness to them, is not safe to go to court for them if they're immigration status is even the slightest bit questionable, or even if they're fully legal and just happen to have a last name that sounds Latin American.
Yes.
Now, were they not showing up before that started? Yes, but it hasn't gotten better.
Right. Yeah. I imagine that's gone drastically up.
I have a few cases that have just been outright dismissed because the plaintiff just stopped appearing. There is a firm that withdrew from hundreds of cases en masse all at once when the RICO actions started getting filed in the federal courts.
Right.
And then, like, all those cases just got left in limbo. It has undermined the ability of attorneys to do their job and reach a resolution of cases. It has undermined the judicial system itself. It's not good.
Yeah. I would be very bad at this, man. I get too angry. So in other words, I mean, I just like I would have trouble staying focused or being unbiased, I guess.
Well, as an attorney, you don't have to be unbiased. My job is to do the best work I can for my client.
Right.
Now, does that sometimes mean that I'm going to have a, knock 'em out defense that's going to be great? Yes. Does that sometimes mean that, like, the best job I can do for my client is tell my client, you should fucking settle this. You should really fucking settle this. You should fucking settle this. Yes, it cuts both ways, but my job is not to be fair and balanced. That is the court's job. My job is to provide a defense to my client.
Yeah.
It's zealous advocacy is the term. And a lot of people confuse that to mean be a dickhead at every possible occasion. But like your job is to provide either a defense to your client if you're a defense attorney, or to pursue your client's case to the fullest extent you can if you are a plaintiff's attorney.
Right. There was something else that you said that piqued my interest there. I think you said along the lines of like that the jury won't necessarily follow the law. And I mean, I kind of envision a jury as sort of like just a group of laypersons. So is there that much of an expectation that they're gonna? I mean,
yes, there is, and that is because there's what is called the pattern jury instruction, and the pattern jury instructions are the actual things that get read to the jury before they deliberate the case, and it lays out for them precisely what the elements of the claims are, what things they're supposed to consider with respect to contributory negligence, how if they, don't find X, Y, and Z, then they can't find A, B, and C. And like all of that is supposed to lay that out for them, and it does, but then you get like juries that fill out the sheets however the fuck they want to fill it out, and then you you have to either ask for a mistrial or poll the jury or appeal the decision.
Right.
More often than not, it's not that they won't follow the law. It is that something like will not get conveyed to them appropriately because a weird ruling was made on what pattern jury instruction was meant to be read, or that they will dramatically inflate the value of a claim because of sympathy.
Right.
And it like a lot of that also comes down to there is an entire field of medical experts, not even medical experts. There's experts that will create life care plans that are like, what is this person expecting to need for the remainder of their life? And it is on the plaintiff side, it is almost always dramatically overvalued. On the defense side, it is often undervalued. But in my experience as a defense attorney, what you will often see is the life care plan saying that this person needs to go to therapy 3 times a week for the rest of their life as a 35-year-old who is injured. And their deposition testimony is that the last time they went to physical therapy was 4 years before the deposition, which likely took place 2 years before the date of trial. And like,
Right.
or you'll see a life care plan that says they're going to need, you know, X surgery and Y surgery and Z surgery. And at the deposition, they were like, well, I was recommended this surgery, but I don't think I'm going to do it.
Right.
That happens so often. You know, I've had cases where like you get what's called a bill of particulars during discovery, which is plaintiffs setting out the specifics of their claims. And in that, it'll include the injuries and whether there's projected future surgeries for that. And like, it is the highest possible value that they can set for all of this stuff. And then at deposition, they're like, yeah, I feel fine. My knee kind of hurts sometimes when the weather changes, but it's not that bad.
Right.
Or like you have the guy who's claiming all these horrible back injuries, and then you find his DJ Instagram,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
literally a thing that happened in a recent case I was assisting.
Incredible.
We found his DJ Instagram. All of the images on it had been removed recently, which tells us his attorneys probably told him, hey, take all those down before we go to trial, you fucking idiot. And then we tried to use the Wayback Machine to get those images. They weren't archived, but it was like
Right.
a crack at like, okay, this guy is claiming that he can never work again and he can't do the things he used to do. And yet, like, we found his personal Instagram, which is a bunch of photos of him riding motorcycles and, you know, cruising around exotic locales in Lamborghinis. And then we found his DJ profile, which was him DJing at parties. And like,
Yeah.
okay, you're going to tell me that you can't go out and enjoy life now? And like, and there are legitimately people that because of an injury have lost their enjoyment of life.
Yeah.
And like, they're valid claims. And then there's DJ Fucknuts over here who like wasn't really injured, but like heard that he could get money from this claim.
Right. Yeah. I would imagine as well that it's probably, well, I mean, I'm just imagining, but you're probably always told to shoot high, right? Like to
there are
ask for more.
plaintiffs' firms. Plaintiffs' attorneys are the ones that make the choices as to like what their demands are, essentially, in the initial pleadings. There are some firms I know that no matter what the injury is, put a $5 million demand in their pleadings. And they know they're going against people with $1 million insurance policies. So the most we're going to be able to offer as a settlement period is $1 million. And it's very unlikely that you're getting $1 million unless you actually like have injured yourself in such a way that you cannot enjoy your life anymore.
Right.
And it's like what do you think this is serving? Like, your $5 million demand doesn't really do anything.
Right.
And you know, there are some plaintiffs' attorneys, like I've had a few cases recently where like we've been talking about potentially going to mediation. And the number that they come back with is like within the verdict range, which is their starting demand. And that's actually a pretty good sign that a plaintiff's attorney understands what the case is actually worth, because what they are then doing is saying, my starting point for this negotiation is in the verdict range, and you can expect that that means they're going to come down into the reasonable settlement range.
Right.
But then there are others that are just like, we want the full policy. And it's like, well, we're not going to bet against ourselves, because that is the most money you could get out of us, even if we went to trial and you won. So no, we're not making a counter offer on that. Make a better demand.
Right.
And then they get all indignant because they're like, well, that's not how this works. The ball's in your court now. And it's actually, no, the ball's not in our court, because the initial demand you made might as well have been $1 bajillion and the moon, because it's not like, it's not something that we, you know,
Right.
if you're demanding, I've got a building and you're suing the management company because you slipped and fell on like ice on the sidewalk, and like, you know, that building has $1 million policy because we had to exchange that insurance policy in discovery, and you've demanded $2 million. No, like, no, you're not. I'm never going to get authorized more than the policy, so that's off the table to begin with. And unless this is like the most clear-cut case where, yeah, your client is extremely injured, they're never going to be in a condition where they can reasonably live a normal life anymore, and we're dead in the water on liability because you happen to have a by the book, they taught this case in torts class claim of negligence, then we'll tender the policy, because at that point, like,
Yeah.
hey, we're gonna get hit for this much anyway. But
Right,
that's
right.
very rare.
Huh.
So it's, it is stupid, but also like there's a reason I don't argue much outside of work anymore, because I get paid to argue about millions of dollars a day, and if you're not going to pay me to argue, why should I do it?
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Like looking at the cases that I touched on today, like easily 20 million in claimed injuries. Now, none of them are going, like, cumulatively, they're probably realistically more. Like, I worked on 5 different cases today, and they're probably all realistically injuries under $1 million in sustainable verdict value. But like, that doesn't mean that they didn't demand $5 million out the gate, because they could.
Yeah.
So
This is fascinating stuff, I have to tell you.
I guess.
Well, from my perspective, for you, it's the mundane every day, but it is interesting to learn about this stuff. So I appreciate you telling me.
The thing about the law is, like, yes, that stuff does become the mundane every day, but like each new case is going to have weird new, like,
Quirks.
oddities to it, quirks.
Yep.
Like there's I can't actually comment on this case, so I'm going to be very sparing in what I say, but for example, proving your client didn't delete the data that was on a cell phone because at the time that it was factory reset, your client's Wi-Fi network was not in connection with the device. And only like a month later, when it was rebooted for the first and only time after it was erased, was your client's Wi-Fi network detected. Like, that kind of thing can become interesting, where you're like putting together an actually novel argument.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the other stuff is just kind of, it is what it is. You're going by the books. Do I enjoy it is a loaded question. I like the people I work with. We have a very collaborative team. I like some of the work, not all of the work. If I liked all of the work, it probably wouldn't be a thing that I was getting paid for.
Right.
It is tedious. It is long hours. It is almost entirely your thought product that is the thing that you are earning that money for.
Mm-hmm.
You have to justify every 6 minutes that you spend on a thing, at least in my field, to an insurance carrier to get paid.
Yep.
Which is tedious and frustrating. And now that they've been using AI tools to comb through billing records to find things that they think they can cut for years in the legal field.
Ugh.
So it, like, this whole new AI is getting injected into everything is, to me, is also kind of like, yep, fucking join the club.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, I mean, like, I'm in development, man. So
yeah. It is very similar to someone who's never done the work you are doing telling you that AI thinks that it could be done better.
Oh yeah. That's everybody, right? Everybody thinks AI is great for the thing that they don't do. Been through that far too much, man. It's funny, your description of the way your work is and how you feel about it is basically the same as me. Very similar. Very different work, but
Yeah, I mean, it's any work. There are parts
Yeah,
that are rewarding and there are parts that are tedious, and you just have to like the parts that are rewarding more than you hate the parts that are tedious.
exactly. Yeah. Like the stuff that I do is pretty fucking mundane and meaningless. I build stores for people. Um, but I really like the building of the store. And it's mostly like you said, what's valuable about what you do is the thinky bit. And the same thing for me. It's basically I sit down and I think about how the hell this needs to be built the right way to meet the client needs, blah blah. And that's what's like kind of rewarding about it for me, and it's why I get paid. So
Yeah, and then occasionally you have just shit show projects. Like I got a motion I got to do starting tomorrow and then finishing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, where I'm opposing plaintiff's motion for summary judgment. And we really don't have legs to stand on in opposing it. I don't think there are arguments I can make. I'm going to make them to the best of my ability because that is my job. But I think at the end of the day, like what's going to get decided is we lose this case.
right.
And like that sucks. I don't like doing that. It makes those harder to write because it's really easy to pull the trigger and produce a 20-page opposition when you feel very gung-ho about that opposition and you think you are sure you are in the right. And it is harder to do that when you are just the opposite sure that like, no, they got our number on this one. Like,
Yeah. And then you still have to do all the things despite it
yeah.
all.
Also, to address another comment from chat, how things work in court is they don't. All of the courts are extremely backed up in New York, and that is in a city that has a substantial court system.
Mm-hmm.
In the suburbs, it is just as bad, but at a smaller scale, and I'm sure it is true of everywhere else in the country. Also, all of the courts are basically dilapidated buildings because the state never wants to put any money towards them because people don't like them. And when people see bills proposing renovations of the courts, they get pissed off and object to them. And it is this horrible spiral where the courts keep getting worse. They continue to be understaffed, so things don't move as quickly, but then they try to push things along more quickly, and it results in horrible backups or getting things wrong. It results in incredible... I had an appearance this week, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a motion for summary judgment, my motion for summary judgment that was on. We had adjourned it a few times, and the notice we got from the court was that on the 11th, it was on for oral argument, which meant plaintiff needed to have their op-in by the 4th, and I had to have my reply papers in by the 10th. All of that gets done. We go into court. I've spent 2 hours prepping to argue this motion, because when you are arguing a motion before a judge, you gotta know your shit.
Right.
You need to be able to make that argument, and essentially, like, you're arguing an incredibly detailed fact pattern, very specific legal standards that it took you, even if you're just doing an affirmation in support, you're not doing a separate statement of facts and memorandum of law, which could bring this up into the 40, 50 page range. Like,
Woof.
you're looking at 24 pages on average for a motion like that of just your writing.
Good Lord.
And then on top of that, all of the exhibits, which will include multiple hundred pages of depositions, photographs, contract documents, whatever the case is about, all of the evidence that needs to be attached to this. And you just gotta fucking know that shit cold. Because it's, it is not often like you see in courthouse dramas where at the start of a trial, an attorney is getting up to make this big long speech. When you are arguing a motion, the judge is going to say, I almost said my last name, which is fucking stupid. Mr. So-and-so, I understand it's your motion. Yes, Your Honor, blah, 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 for the defendants. We're moving for summary judgment here. This action arises from an alleged trip and fall on January, blah, 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 19, blah, blah, blah. Plaintiff is walking down the street. They crossed the sidewalk in front of XYZ Street, New York City, when they claim that they tripped and fall on an alleged broken sidewalk. And you need to go through all the facts. You need to go through all of the arguments. And you need to be able to lay that shit out cold.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get all of that out. The judge is going to interrupt you to ask a question 20 to 30 seconds in. And that's being generous, because the thing they get wrong on legal dramas is when you go into that courtroom to argue a motion, it is not just you, your opponent, and the judge in that courtroom. It's you, your opponent, the judge, and the 100 other motions that are on the calendar for that. So they don't have time to sit there and let you wax poetic for 5 minutes about your case. They need to get in there, get the facts. And a good judge will know the law that is applicable and like hone in on the questions that they ask you to speed things along.
Right.
An okay judge will not do that, but at the end of oral arguments will say, okay, I'm taking this on submission. A decision will come later. And on submission means that they're going to take the papers, hand them to their law clerk, tell their law clerk to do the research on it, and then brief them on it, and then make a decision based on that. Whereas a bad judge will just steamroll through an argument based on what they think is proper, and then hand down an order that doesn't necessarily get it right. And I say that as someone who has won motions on an order that didn't quite get it right. Well,
Right.
I know we should have won that motion, but it is not for the reason that the judge has stated, and it is likely going to get appealed as a result of that, and that makes things worse.
Man, oh man. So what you're saying is it's not all My Cousin Vinny in there.
No, though My Cousin Vinny is maybe one of the best film examples of a on the stand questioning of a witness.
Yeah.
The entire ending section regarding laying the foundation of her as an expert, having worked in mechanic shop, and then walking her slowly through the questions that lead step by step to the conclusion that no, there's no way the vehicle could have been what was described, in a way that is, like, if you think about it, the audience viewing that movie is the layman, like a jury would be hearing that in court.
Yeah.
And in sitting there watching that movie, even if you don't know jack shit about cars, you can understand the points that she is making and the stepping stones to get to, oh, it couldn't have possibly been the car that they're describing. Yep. And that, like, if you are doing good questioning of an expert witness, that is the effect that you want. You want to be able to reduce the expert witness's expert opinion on a subject that the jury probably doesn't know anything about, to something the jury can understand. Now, sometimes that is more difficult because you get an expert witness that doesn't know how to communicate particularly well. And more often than not, that is because you are using an expert that you were unfamiliar with, but like,
yeah,
the carrier said, this is the guy we want to use. Whereas like we talk about what experts we use among ourselves constantly with our colleagues. And like one of the things you get brought up is like, how does he look on the stand? Like, is this someone that conveys the information understandably, conveys it well, and is likable? Versus, is this guy kind of a pompous ass because he thinks he's the best surgeon on the planet? And like, hey, maybe we don't want to use him ever again.
Right, yeah. Because those the sort of impressions and things like that are a factor, not just like the raw facts. Like if it pisses the jury off, just experience the man, that's probably bad.
When I write up a deposition that I've done, whether it is me conducting a deposition of plaintiff, me conducting a deposition of a co-defendant, or me defending the deposition of our witness, I write up how the jury is likely to perceive that person. And it's like, it isn't glazing them. Um, if I think, for example, that the plaintiff is going to be perceived incredibly sympathetically because she's a 72-year-old grandmother of 4 who got injured on Christmas Eve, I include that in my write-up. If I
Nice.
think that our witness is kind of a pompous prick, who went on to talk about how actually he went to Harvard, I write that up in my write-up, and I am not generous about it. I am very clear that he speaks in a way where it is clear that he thinks he is better than most people in the room, and a jury is not going to like him. Like, you have to be very, like, not blunt, but like, you have to be honest in your assessment.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's like the Doge shit is the thing that really pisses me off about that stuff is that, like, when that whole line of questioning about, well, it's what it says in the executive order.
Yeah.
Here's exactly how you should have handled that. You knew that the executive order was going to be a part of this. You have a copy of it. You ask him to tell you. Now, sir, as we sit here today, what is your understanding of what DEI means?
Right.
Then he gives you his bullshit answer. Do you understand DEI to be an acronym? Well, yes. Well, do you know what that acronym stands for? And then whatever, answer he gives, if he says, no, I don't really know, I said, would it refresh your recollection if I said diversity, equity, and inclusion? And then maybe he bullshits his way out of that one. I go, now, what is your understanding in the context of the work you were doing for Doge in reviewing grants, what DEI meant? Okay. So your understanding of DEI was what was contained in the executive order. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Can you tell me what it said in that executive order? Would it refresh your recollection if you reviewed that executive? Okay, I'm going to mark for identification Plaintiff's Exhibit A. This is an executive order dated blah, 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 signed by President Donald J. Trump. Is this the executive order that you and I were discussing a moment ago? Yes. Okay. This is marked as Defendant's Exhibit A. Can you read for me that paragraph, about 2 paragraphs down the page, where it defines what DEI is? And you have them read it into the record. And I say,
Yeah.
do you understand what that means? Could you tell me what your understanding is of what that means? And how is that applicable to the work you were doing? Now, when you were reviewing a grant, how did this come into consideration when conducting that review? Like, you fucking dog walk them through this shit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you've sold me.
It's,
I now wish it was you instead.
it was a foresee, and like, listen, I'm not going to cast aspersions on the attorney because, like, shit will come up in depositions you just didn't understand. But
Yeah.
if you knew you were going to ask questions about DEI and that executive order, which I'm sure he did, I'm sure it was in his outline, you plan for that. I have depositions where I go in with a person's entire medical record.
Yeah.
Because I'm planning to ask them about, like, oh, they claim their back was injured in this. Well, then why do we have a record from 6 months before the alleged accident where you're complaining of lower back pain to your doctor? Like,
Right.
and you have to walk people through stuff like that.
True.
And it just feels like, I'm not going to say it's necessarily bad lawyering. I haven't seen the full deposition. I don't know the claims that they're trying to prove in this. I don't know that that's necessarily germane to the core of those claims. And so maybe he didn't entirely plan for that. But if that was crucial to his questioning, there are ways to either get the answer you want out of the person or make them look willfully ignorant in their inability to answer it. And
Yeah.
just letting them say, well, I don't really understand, we just went by what the executive order said, is something where it's like, no, but you could take it the step further and get him to say that he doesn't actually understand what that means by like showing him the language of that order.
Yeah. I feel like the one with the younger looking kid got a little closer to that. So they did get him to say that he didn't think it was inappropriate for somebody who doesn't know anything to make these decisions based off of that, which I thought was
Yeah, I mean, you'll get wild admissions out of people at a
yeah.
deposition.
I don't think
You
I've
know.
ever hated anybody more instantly than I did in that moment. I will say.
Yeah, but that is kind of what I mean by like I was not particularly happy. Like
Yeah.
the person being deposed, I think, is a piece of shit scumbag. The attorney doing the deposition could have done,
Yeah,
and maybe
you
there's
want
a
him
reason
to
he didn't. But
you want him to extract it more accurately out of him.
and again, maybe there's a reason he didn't because maybe it isn't particularly important to the claims. It was just a way to kind of try and make the guy look foolish and like did he make the guy look foolish? Yeah. Did he need to drive a nail into the coffin? Maybe not. But, you know,
Yeah.
there is a more effective way to make him look like a dipshit, and it is by making him read it into the record and then telling you that he doesn't understand what it means because that's the only way he can avoid giving an answer as to what it actually means. Because if he tried to say something other than what it said, he'd look like a dipshit.
Yeah.
So, eh.
Yeah, I think you're definitely putting in words a sort of vague feeling I did have viewing those. I kind of feel like
Like,
those guys should be kind of in that chair basically forever with someone just trying to make them look like a dipshit for the rest of their lives. That would make me feel okay, I think.
it wouldn't matter to me one way or another there. That, like, bringing that out at a deposition doesn't particularly matter unless you need to undermine the witness's credibility.
Yeah.
And I, like, I don't think those guys have any credibility, so there's nothing there to really undermine. But it is one of those things where, like, it makes me mad that that ended up being the clip, because how does that become a clip unless it gets circulated? And,
Yes.
like, hey man, if you wanted to make that your gotcha moment that got circulated to the press after this, maybe do a better job at it.
Yeah. Yeah. It does kind of seem to be like a common theme of stuff that's been going on in the past decade or so. It's just this sort of like everything is a little bit middling and inconclusive, despite there being other things that indicate that it probably didn't need to be that way.
I mean, it's vague enough that I can't say no to that, but I don't think that like ascribing doom and gloom to all of it immediately is productive or beneficial.
No, I
And I
know.
think that the more important thing is like shit has always sucked at the top, where it doesn't have to suck is in your community. So like do the work in your community. That's really the only way to fuck. If you did an Enjoyers Club, My Cousin Vinny, I would guest star.
Fuck yeah, let's do it. I love that movie.
It is so good.
Let's do it. I'm down, man.
But yeah, it is after 1 a.m. and I have to write this fucking motion starting tomorrow. So I am gonna smoke weed and post in your chat for an hour longer than I'm supposed to and then fall asleep.
Oh no, you don't even have to worry about that. I'm basically hopping off immediately. As
Well,
soon
now
as
I
we
have to
do here.
find some other fucking chat to post
I'm
in for an hour
sorry.
while I smoke weed.
I'm sorry.
I was only 50% high for this.
I'm sorry. You'll find somebody.
I will say I am very proud of how I articulated that being 50% high.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how fucking ingrained in me it is at this point.
Right.
So
Well, thanks for popping on and educating all
Yeah,
of
it's
us.
it is one of those things where like I have typed it in chat, yeah, but a lot of it would have gotten lost in conversation because
Oh yeah.
it really is a different mindset of thinking about it. That like for as bad as law school is, like it breaks your brain in the right way to make you able to think about it that way.
Yeah.
Um, even if it doesn't teach you how to practice law in any way, shape, or form. And I think most people are doing law school wrong by taking a bunch of courses that aren't designed to help them pass the bar exam.
Right.
That is a topic for a different day.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, you have a good night.
See you.
See ya. Well, that was cool. That was nice of Dave to walk us through that stuff, man. That's super interesting to me. And also, like, I am definitely on the, I'm on the doomer end of the spectrum because I just have a lot of anger that I don't have anywhere to place. So no, yeah, Dave is a super smart guy. I don't. Yeah, I was gonna say I can't imagine anybody thinks Dave is actually thinks Dave is dumb. That'd be weird. But yeah, I think it's good. It's good for me to hear stuff like that. It's a little bit more level-headed, I will say. I just don't ever talk to anybody. I work all the time, and then the only other thing that's happening to me is like experiencing bad news about the world outside, and just it's like stewing in that all day long, which is definitely not a recipe for success when it comes to mental health and perspective.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if somehow someday they wants to do something like that, we maybe could. Garbage. Oh no.
Sorry, I have fixed it. That just happens out of nowhere. There was no reason for that to happen. That's the thing where the microphone just jumped to 100. Yeah, I didn't do anything. I did absolutely nothing. I did get some Discord messages, so I think it was, and you know who you are. It was probably your fault. Maybe that might be the cause. So in some sense, you helped me. There's a good chance that Discord's notifications, even though I have Discord sounds off. No, it wasn't Dave that messaged me. But the messenger is present. I just don't want to out them. But I think Discord might be the culprit here. Because it happened at exactly the same time. It's just too suspicious. Anyway, sorry for that. Whatever I was saying didn't matter. I did just get a third message. And it has not happened, so yeah, it didn't do it. So I guess that was not the case. Damn it. It would have been nice to have an explicit cause. I am saying goodbye right now. Dave hopped on to have a conversation for a bit, so that went much longer than intended. Thank you for the biddies. Very much appreciated. Y'all, I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you for hanging out and watching. No, Dave, it's not your fault.
It is your fault, Dave.
It was complex. Yeah. Have a great night, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.